Meanwhile, I just found out that a show you don't watch is The View on now. As on the second, okay, it's still on, and when you're listening, if you're listening in delay, I apologize. But they already talked about me, and I cannot wait to clarify something that they skewed, and only they can. I know what you're saying. I know it was still on. But first, I want to put it in context, right? You don't have my question? Okay. So yesterday, I'm talking to Congressman Ryan Zinke, who is now Secretary of the Interior. And in talking about the memorial that they have on 9/11 and Shanksville, Shannon Bream's here. And Shannon, you can join me on this. I said to him, are you concerned 100 years from now, they're going to be looking to take this memorial down like they are other memorials? And, of course, I'm referring to the fact they're trying to take down Columbus in Midtown Manhattan. They have a commission with 4 different historians, Shannon Bream, analyzing every statue and monument in Manhattan to see if they're worthy of staying up. So Christopher Columbus, Ulysses S. Grant, 2-term president. I believe he won the Civil War. I got to check again.
I've heard.
Right. They are looking to take down Andrew Jackson in New Orleans. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, that's right. A special's coming out. We already did the debate at the statue. And then they're looking to also have a movement at the University of Virginia to take down Thomas Jefferson. People find him offensive. As well as a movement to take down, to look at Washington, get Stonewall Jackson off schools and what have you. So I asked him if there's a concern about that. Now, on top of that, I noticed on one of my More to Know stories that at Columbia, they were taking out American flags commemorating those who lost their lives on 9/11. On 9/11, they're taking it off. So I brought that up. I said, are you concerned? And Ryan Zinke essentially said, to paraphrase, I think it's really bad when people forget about their history. And I think it's important for countries to mark their history, and said something to the answer like that, which brought up this. By the way, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How was your show?
You should have been watching it, and you would know it was excellent.
Right. I had to make a choice. Either do mine or watch yours.
All right, well, I'll let it go this time.
So Allison just pulled this off The View.
Let's go from hypocritical to downright dumb. Okay. Yesterday, Fox and Friends host Brian Kilmeade interviewed Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, who was at the 9/11 memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So here's the ridiculousness of it. Victims, 9/11. Perpetrators, Confederacy. Yeah. Do you understand the difference? Yeah. Victims. These were victims at 9/11. No one moved that memorial. But we are, and everybody says they're very, pro-America. And so when you see something that is put together to intimidate, or was put together to intimidate, and that is celebrating a group of people who decided that they wanted to fight for their right to own slaves, I think it's kind of, you can't, it's beyond apples and oranges. Get a book, read a book, crack a book, read something.
Crack a book. That would be good.
You got a shout out from Whoopi.
Right.
I don't have a lot of tolerance for The View.
Either do I. But I just think I just thought I'd bring it up. What they don't understand, they are now putting a definer on the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. They're now defiling the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. They are chopping off heads of Columbus, who I don't think fought in the Civil War, but I got to crack a book according to Whoopi Goldberg.
Well, the interesting thing is, listen, we all admit and we all know that slavery was a terrible scourge in this country. We, like a few other countries, decided that it was a terrible thing, and we got rid of it and renounced that. Not all countries have done that. I mean, there are more people truthfully enslaved now around the world than there ever were during the Civil War. So there are plenty of current conflicts and people who need to be rescued that we all should be worried about. But when you go around erasing all history, I think things can be put into context. I mean, do you keep these statutes as a discussion about something very ugly and painful? That's a conversation that you could have. But when you start randomly going around and just knocking out, you talk about this, what they're doing in New York and going around to every statute. I don't have a great confidence that that's going to be fair and balanced, if I'm being honest. And what are you going to do about UVA's campus? The whole thing was designed and put together by Thomas Jefferson. And there are plenty of stories, if you do go, quote, crack a book and read about some of the founders, that many of them did have opposition to slavery, that by law, some of them were bound. It was illegal to free your slaves for some of them at the time they were alive. And and some of them put into their wills that they wanted their slaves set free upon their death. That was the only option they had at the time. So it's way more complex. Nobody's all good. Nobody's all bad. And there's a lot to be examined.
It's been said that every Southern landowner, almost 90% of them had slaves. So to put your values, obviously that's wrong, on people that lived over 200 years ago, I think it shows the arrogance of our generation. Of course slavery is wrong. But in 2008, as I bring up all the time, when you asked Barack Obama, is marriage between a man and a woman, he said yes. In 2012...
So did Hillary Clinton.
Right. In 2012, he said no. Was he a horrible person in 2008? What about all those people who thought it was perfectly okay for women not to vote? What about all those people, that thought it was perfectly okay for blacks to go to the back of the bus? Are they all horrible people? They're brought up in a time where for some reason that was considered the norm. But as a society, we kept getting better. We always keep improving. But you can't say that Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson are bad because you don't agree with everything that they did.
I mean, if that's the case, then every leader who's ever been is going to have a statue come down. I mean, there have been great people that we admire who've been accused of all kinds of things, domestic abuse, other criminal activity. I mean, people are flawed human beings. As you've said before on this show, there was one perfect person to walk this earth. He's not here anymore, at least not in physical form. And short of that, everyone who's got a bust or a painting or a statue somewhere has got a flaw or something disagreeable.
Evidently, Ulysses S. Grant. So he fights the war and he decides, like Lincoln, I'm looking for amnesty for the South. We're going to bring this country back together. There'll be no retribution. You can leave with your horses. You can leave with your guns. And everyone saluted him. He rolled on to be two-term president. And what he did as president, some scholars can examine. However, he evidently displayed some anti-Semitic behavior. I'm not sure. So they say we should take Ulysses S. Grant's statue out of New York. Okay? Mm-hmm. What role did he have in taking down the Confederacy? I think a pretty good one, considering every other general failed. This is what Winston Groom wrote. He's an esteemed author who wrote Patriotic Fire. I am not proud that my ancestors owned slaves, but neither do I subscribe to the historic fallacy of assigning present-day ethics and morals to such a widely accepted practice by people who lived 200 years ago. Virtually every family of means in the South had slaves, then and many in the North too, let alone slaveholders in Britain, France, Portugal, and elsewhere, including 12 of the first 15 U.S. presidents and most of the nation's founding fathers. As abominable as we consider it today, it has taken long years and countless deaths of men, good and bad, to arrive at our present state of morality about the matter. I mean, can you say it better than that?
Yeah,
His own ancestors had slaves. He is an esteemed historian and put it in perspective.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we all have to, you have to look. You have to look back and you have to look present and you have to look forward at people who are flawed human beings. We all agree that slavery is a horrific stain on this country, and thank God it has been rectified. But again, I like to point to the fact that there are people who are there is human trafficking, there is domestic slavery, forced labor, sex trafficking. I mean, there are horrible things happening now. And I think all of this vitriol can be aimed at that. Can we not get passionate about people who are in desperate, horrible situations? And this is not just a foreign issue. This is happening in the U.S. as well. Can we focus some of this energy on getting those people rescued from where they are? We can have conversations about people in the past, but again, that's what we learn from. That's how we know slavery is a bad thing and that there was great conflict that almost completely destroyed this country. I mean, that's part of the conversation.
Right. And I just read, too, in 1948, it was Nancy Pelosi's dad in Baltimore that dedicated a statue in Baltimore of General Lee because he wanted to bring the city together. Nancy Pelosi's dad should be vilified. So, evidently, if historians say
Have you had her on the show?
Is she booked for tomorrow?
I know you've asked.
Evidently, General Lee did not want a statue. Evidently, he was like, listen, I'm done. Don't worry about it. I'm teaching at Washington and Lee.
I'm good.
Doing my own thing. However, there are a lot of people that think the only people that could have a civil war and bring the country back together and not have the vanquished against the victors, it was because he decided There'll be amnesty. There'll be no guerrilla war. The country comes back together.
Yeah.
So I can't believe we're talking about this in a time in which there's so much news, but we are talking about this in a time in which there's so much news.
Well, and listen, these statues have been there for decades. I don't know why just now they need to go. I mean, why didn't they need to go under the Obama administration as well? I mean, if you have objections to these things and find them difficult, it's funny to me to see, you know, some prominent folks now step forward and say, I'm an African American, I have a voice in this community, whether it's a prominent celebrity or sports person or actor or musician, whatever, and say, I've never once looked at those statues and felt bad about myself or felt like it was oppressive. Others say, yes, it's painful. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see it. I don't want it on my campus. But I think there's a conversation to have.
Right. You could have a conversation.
Yeah,
you don't have to chop the head off or do it in the middle of the night. Here's Charles Barkley.
I'm 54 years old. I've never thought about those statues a day in my life. I think if you ask most black people, to be honest, they thought a day in their life about those stupid statues.
How are you?
Listen, I can't speak for him. I mean, that's his opinion. But again, I think there's a conversation to be had about the statues and why they suddenly in 2017, with maybe connected to a new presidency and people being unhappy about that, they suddenly need to go.
1-866-408-7669. We'll take your calls and talk to Shannon Bream about what she has coming up. Does she like when Bill hammers in Orlando? I mean, we'll find out the truth. Don't answer yet when we return.
You're with Brian Kilmeade.
Yesterday, Fox and Friends host Brian Kilmeade interviewed Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, who was at the 9/11 memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and he used that moment to make this comparison. Take a look.
Do you worry 100 years from now someone's going to try to take that memorial down like they're trying to remake our memorials today?
Well, I'm one that believes that, you know, we should learn from history, and I think our monuments are part of our country's history.
So here's the ridiculousness of it. Victims, 9/11. Perpetrators, Confederacy.
Yeah.
Do you understand the difference? Victims, these were victims at 9/11. No one's going to move that memorial. But we are, and everybody says they're very, you know, pro-America and stuff. So when you see something that is put together to intimidate, or was put together to intimidate, and that is celebrating a group of people who decided that they wanted to fight for their right to own slaves, I think it's kind of, you can't, it's beyond apples and oranges. Get a book, read a book, crack a book, read something.
I don't know him. I know him. Yeah, you know him. I don't know him, but I was just this morning doing some research, and he has said things that before, you know, that are inappropriate. Brian Kilmeade, he said this. Yeah, during a celebration of National Taco Day, he asked the Nicaraguan meteorologist Maria Molina, "You grew up on tacos, correct?" And then she says, "I didn't grow up on tacos, I'm Nicaraguan." So then he also said the reason married people in Finland and Sweden aren't as likely to suffer from Alzheimer's is because Americans keep marrying other species and ethnics. Oh. So this is
other
a guy.
Species?
Yes, and he later apologized for that comment.
They always apologize. Yeah, they always apologize.
Is he just not thoughtful,
Well,
or
is he just dumb?
Or is he just,
I can't answer why he does it. I can't answer why he does it. I know that I think there was a way even to make, if you wanted to make an argument about a slippery slope, you can't bring in 9/11.
No,
so this made absolutely
apples and oranges.
no
It's like
sense. Right. But also, I think people who are on TV, like to your point, I think you have a responsibility to not do stupid stuff like this. Like it's not, people make mistakes. You can make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but this is so ridiculous of a correlation that you do bear some responsibility to come out, not only apologize, but stop doing stuff like this.
Yeah, crack a
Just
book,
stop
man.
doing it.
Well, you
Don't
talk
let
about-
people think you're that dumb.
Talk about politicizing a moment. We get crap every time we talk about certain issues when they're happening. It's 9/11. There's no one that should be talking about that.
Yeah, and because we know how you do stuff, right? If you ever want to come and sit with us, we'd be happy to host you at the table. Because we want to know. All right? You know? We'll tell you to your face what we think.
Yeah.
So come on over. We'll be right back with more Hot Topics.